Okay, presumably we are live, though a better word would be comatose because the connection is extremely bad. I apologize beforehand for possible interruptions during the live broadcast because everyone is on internet. Let me just do my adjustments here. Okay, we're going to start in a minute. A few minutes ago, Turkey's banking regulator, BDDK or BRSA. By the way, do you hear me? If you hear me, please just say yes. I know there are people out there. Do you hear me? Is my sound fine? Do you hear me, man? Okay, yes, you do. Great. Um, okay, it is 3:30 Istanbul time. Welcome to Real Turkey channel. I am your old face presenter Atilla Yeşilara, but soon we'll be all on the streets and you shall see new faces, I promise you. I must give you a breaking news. A few minutes before this broadcast started, Turkey's banking regulator, BDDK or BRSA in the English acronym, just banned Paribas, UBS, and Citibank from financial transactions in Turkey on account of defaulting on their swap commitments, which obviously is a mistake, but it's not crime, and it is a draconian penalty. This shows how severe the pressure on the Turkish lira is. This is why BRSA is resorting to such measures. But this is not what we're going to talk about today. It's just that I thought you should hear about this if you're interested in Turkey. I want to talk about the progress of the outbreak in Turkey, the government's decision to partially open up the economy and what the medical community is saying about that decision. To me, there's a certain amount of politics involved in these decisions, as everywhere else. But the possibility of a second outbreak has been substantially increased. For 5 business days or so, Turkey's COVID-19 cases declined to the range of 1,000 to 1,800. Remember, our peak was 5,000 a day, and the Turkish health system has done a heroic work in terms of fighting the virus. And on the basis of that, I said, well, fine, yeah, let's go ahead and start normalizing the economy. Then yesterday, the number of cases suddenly jumped to 2,800 some odd numbers, 35, I believe. And the health minister, currently, according to several surveys, the most trusted politician in Turkey, said this is because after a 3-day lockdown starting on 23rd of April, there was an unusual activity on the streets. And in fact, if you do add up the days, 25th of April to 6th of May, that's roughly 14 days, the incubation period of the virus. And suddenly, social contact had increased after a 3-day stay-home order. People neglected social distancing measures, and we had a spike. This may be repeated. That's what's my biggest fear, that the epidemic is not completely under the control. If we look at what other advanced countries which had success with this outbreak are doing, for instance, South Korea, Germany, They are doing random universal testing, which is they go to people sampled randomly who show no symptoms, who have never complained about coronavirus, and take samples, blood samples or mouth swabs, to test whether they're virus positive, because it is a well-established fact that a certain percentage of the patients carry no symptoms. I think in Germany, this ratio is something like 20%. In China, it was something like 40%, to the extent Chinese data is reliable. In Turkey, we don't know, though one medical professional commented that the incidence of these asymptomatic cases in the population could be as high as 20%. So now let's look at the figures. We have roughly 130,000 cases and roughly 4,000 deaths. The case and death numbers are questioned not only by some Turkish medical experts, but also by a study conducted by Financial Times. Also by the CHP mayor of Istanbul, Mr. Ekrem İmamoğlu, who says deaths in Istanbul have increased, corrected for seasonality and population increase 30 to 35% this March and April. And he suspects that death numbers because of COVID-19 are underreported. Now remember, and this is very important, I'm not implying that the Ministry of Health is hiding actual cases. There are methodological complications in terms of reporting, as well as an extremely busy health system which doesn't have much time for paperwork. So this is a no-fault mistake as far as I'm concerned. Similarly, if we apply this ratio of 30% underestimating the death numbers to the case numbers, we get something like 180,000 actual cases. If 25% of these, if 25% of the patients show no symptoms whatsoever, that would mean there are roughly 40,000 people out there who don't know they are sick. And once, the doors are open, they will be socializing with everyone and spreading the virus once again. How do I know? Because I watch TV every day. And you see crowded streets. For those of you who have visited Turkey or who are from Turkey, you know the bazaars, farmers markets, I suppose they're called in the United States, where it's almost impossible to maintain social distancing measures. Also, it happens to be the month of Ramadan, the holy month of fasting, where tradition dictates we visit our elders, relatives, neighbors, and break fast together. And we also pray together. Though mosques are closed, there are a lot of prayer houses which are not officially licensed, and no one knows whether communal prayers are taking place in those or not. But it seems to me that combined with good weather, social distancing measures, and the rule to carry a mask at all times in public have been ignored. And since the incidence of the virus in the population is not accurately determined, and these people in turn, there are a lot of people out there who don't know they're sick and they're actively spreading the disease. To some extent, there is corroboration for my allegations by Health Minister Mr. Koca, who said yesterday, after seeing the jump in case numbers, he was annoyed or frustrated by the unusual activity on the streets. Today, just before this broadcast, I saw a TV report. Cars have lined up at the entrance of Turkey's prime tourist resort city township, Bodrum. And that, people are just flocking to the Aegean and Mediterranean coasts, which would percolate the virus further in the population. So it is kind of early to normalize the economy. It would have been much more preferable. Once again, I'm parroting the opinion of some medical experts, not all, that we should have waited at least until the end of Ramadan, that's until the end of May, and then declare the curfew throughout the holiday, the religious vacation for 3 days, maybe for 5 days, to make sure case numbers really come down. And in the meantime, instituted a universal testing scheme to make sure we identify remaining clusters. So that's the first mistake, and that's where politics is involved. And I will explain why Mr. Erdogan is in such a rush to normalize the economy. Two, opening up the economy is starting from the wrong end. As of 11th of May, Turkish shopping malls will be open to service. I mean, if you want to catch a virus, you go to a shopping mall. Of course, they are taking measures, but how effective are these? Except the major retail stores and the flagship stores in shopping centers, the average store is something like 20 square meters. And even if you want to, there is no way you can observe social distancing there. And at the end of the month, tourist facilities which have received a clean certificate from the ministry will also open. How do you maintain social distancing and how do you wear a mask in a tourist facility? I don't know. Medical experts, in fact, two medical experts who serve on the National Science Council, which advises the health ministry, said it wasn't their wish that shopping centers be opened. They would have started with smaller restaurants and perhaps even primary schools. So there's a clear case of politicking in the sense that opinions by the medical authorities have not been observed by the presidency. Another case, now I'm moving to a different subject, which is really painful for me to talk about. Another case of politicking or playing politics with public health is the efforts by the AKP administration to sabotage relief efforts by CHP-held municipalities. CHP is the main opposition party of Turkey. The presidency has announced a donation campaign. So imagine that there's a bank account number. Every citizen is encouraged to contribute, and presumably the monies thus accumulated will be distributed to the poor, though I have no idea who receives the money because there is no accountability. The people, the charity in charge of this doesn't publish monthly accounts or monthly reports. The Istanbul municipality, Ankara, and others held by CHP are pretty much doing the same thing. They have established their own accounts, they're collecting money, and they're publishing the results. The state forbid this, declared them illegal. So the municipalities don't have campaign money to help the needy. They're running out of money simply because they can't collect taxes. In the meantime, they are spending all their resources to distribute food, basic necessities, and healthcare products to the population. Even these campaigns have been sabotaged. During a lockdown period in Istanbul and Muğla, municipality bread factories were giving away free bread and they were stopped by the police. To further sabotage efforts, Turkey's Energy Regulatory Board opened an investigation into the Istanbul gas utility for delaying bills. The Istanbul utility owned by Istanbul municipality says, I can't read the gas meters because there was a lockdown. What do you expect me to do? it is completely incomprehensible to me that Mr. Erdogan doesn't want CHP mayors to steal the show from him, even though that might increase the suffering of the poor. And why is he doing so? Because according to a survey by Consensus, that's the name of Turkish company, they are not always the most accurate company, but they are fairly clean. That is, they're politically impartial. The most popular politician in Turkey is the health minister. Mr. Erdogan is second. The third person is the CHP mayor of Ankara, Mansur Yavaş. The fourth popular person is the Istanbul mayor of CHP, Mr. Ekrem İmamoğlu. Mr. Erdogan is afraid that Mansur Yavaş and Ekrem İmamoğlu will be his rivals in the next presidential election. Why is Mr. Erdogan in a rush to open the economy? Simply because, according to Metropole and Eurasia surveys, the relief is not reaching the people. Roughly 60% of the people have either not received relief that's due to them or they think they deserve, or they are not happy with the amount of compensation they are receiving. According to a study by the main opposition party, CHP, but corroborated by other sources, currently 20% of Istanbul workforce is unemployed, and many of them are not receiving anything. There are two reasons. A, most of them don't qualify for unemployment insurance because they haven't contributed enough in the past. B, they fall in the cracks. They are self-employed and for whom there are no programs. Three, bureaucratic red tape. I mean, this happens everywhere. Even small companies in the United States complain about it, that they are not getting relief in time. And in Turkey, bureaucracy is no faster than the United States, is the best I can say. And I collect poll data religiously, and I average them to make sure, a poll might be biased or it might have selected the wrong sample, thus reaching incorrect conclusions. According to my poll of polls data, as of May, the AKP-MHP coalition has 48% of the national vote. So they no longer control the majority. That is, after the polls distribute undecided voters according to parties. Of the voters are undecided. And this is my personal opinion. I can't prove it. I don't think they're undecided between AKP and its main opposition, CHP. I speculate that they're undecided whether they should stay with AKP or switch to two alternative parties established by former lieutenants of Mr. Erdogan. That is, former Prime Minister Mr. Ahmet Davutoğlu and former Economy Minister, Czar, we call them, Mr. Ali Babacan. And these two party leaders have been criticizing Mr. Erdogan very vocally. According to the polls, their parties each party garners about 2.5% of the national vote. So there's already some kind of migration from AKP to these parties, although it is very small, but they're moving the needle. I think Mr. Erdogan, with his immense instinct for what the population thinks and his survival instincts, understand that unless he restarts the economy and engineers a very rapid recovery, is going to lose votes. Some of his Congress people, AKP Congress people, MHP Congress people, may migrate to these new parties called DEVA and Gelecek, meaning future. And his coalition might lose the majority in the parliament, which might somehow trigger early elections. This is why we have an untimely reopening of the economy, as well as several populist measures, one of which, in my view, is what I announced at the beginning of this presentation. 3 international banks have been banned from doing financial transactions in Turkey. Also, BRSA issued a new decree today defining manipulation. Probably most of the things I said today come under the heading of a new crime, discouraging people from investing in Turkey or holding deposits, and I may be sued, but who cares? That ship has sailed years ago. This is also economic populism and trying to silence dissident voices who may actually be advising the government what needs to be done. At the end, I think Turkey is facing 2 dangers. I'm afraid I don't expect a national outbreak, a second wave, but we might have local outbreaks in the tourist centers of Bodrum, Antalya, etc., etc. We might have another one coming from the Syrian border. And the epicenter of the outbreak, Istanbul, may continue to report higher than expected cases for a long time, which would require further lockdowns and further disruptions in economic activity. Secondly, with rising mistrust in government and rising case numbers, even though the economy is open, many people will simply not report to work or open their stores or visit shopping centers, or in general reduce their consumption, afraid of losing their jobs, and the economic recovery will be stymied at the start. Thus, Mr. Erdogan will not get what he wants. At the end, it's quite possible that Turkey remains in recession through the 3rd quarter, maybe even the 4th quarter of this year. And the economic stress and poverty gets so bad that AKP starts losing constituencies, which would mean political instability and potentially early elections. This obviously is, thinking too far ahead and perhaps putting the cart in front of the horse. But for those who want to invest in Turkey or who have trade and business relations in Turkey, I just wanted to give a heads up. This is a surprise that we have 234 visitors who may have stayed on a few minutes. I want to thank you for watching me, and I hope you would share this so that we have a bigger audience and our message gets across. We try to be impartial, though of course we are free journalists and always critical of anyone who is in the government. We have watched Atilla Yeşilada. He says goodbye from Istanbul.